applications. And Eric, how are you doing?
Oh, just great.
Great, great. You ready for your interview?
Oh, yes, indeed.
All right. Now, Eric, how old were you when you first started writing?
This has to go back to when I was about 7 years old. I know I had the inkling to do that. And I know I've concretely put words on paper when I was 10 years old because I still have the papers.
You do.
Oh, yeah. And I actually incorporated a page of that into a short story a few years back. So back in 1977, when the first Star Wars movie was coming out, I was putting words on paper that would eventually be bought by a publisher, make me money, and be read by people that I will never ever meet. So that's kind of cool.
That is cool. That is cool. Yeah. Now, at what age did you decide that you're going to pursue writing as a way to make a living? At that age or a little older?
Oh well, I've never made a living at it, so we're not there yet. I've made some, I've had some wonderful successes and had, some nice bit of income off of it, but it's not paying the rent.
Yep.
I My father was an amateur writer. He
He
never
was.
really, what's that?
He was an amateur writer?
Yeah. Uh,
Wow.
he never really got it together to publish much of anything. He had a short story, and then later on we did a book together. But his dedication to the craft and his he was just in love with words, and that bled off onto me. And
Yep.
everybody in the house was a reader, so we were all very literate. But the idea of, oh, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could put a story together. Wouldn't that be cool? Was from a really early age. And of course, unless you come out of the box writing the Forever War like Joe Haldeman, you got to write a lot of garbage before you can get anything that's even
Yes, you
remotely
do.
worth looking at. So I
It,
did that all through my teen years. In high school, I started to get responses from editors of magazines. Daryl Schweitzer, when he was editing
oh, really?
Amazing Magazine, was the first person
Really?
who ever responded to me. I was 15 or 16.
That's
And
great,
I was
actually.
just amazed because all I gotten were form rejections from magazines. And here's this guy who like addressed me directly and talked about the, stupid story I'd sent him that he saw something worthwhile in. The seeds were there. And it's like, and he
Really?
said, oh, you're almost there. And it's like, oh my God, I'm 15, 16 freaking years old and I'm almost there. Well, I wouldn't, publish anything until I was actually 23. But the
What?
story I told when I was 23, I wrote when I was 19. So good old Daryl was not off by too much.
Who was your
What was
next
the
big
question? I
contact?
just went off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. What was your next big contact? What was
What's
your
that?
next big what was your next big contact in
Contact?
the
What do you
industry?
mean?
Well, that responded to you.
Oh, well, this was back at this is pre-internet days. So if you wanted to write and submit your stories, the only thing available was basically the writer's market. You must remember this, the big
Yes, I
colored
remember the writer's
book.
market.
Yeah, that mother. And
Yep.
there'd be like,
I got every copy of it.
yeah, and there'd be 2.5 pages of science fiction magazines that you could send to,
Yep.
like 7, 8 titles, and half of them would be the really big ones like Asimov's and Analog and stuff
Yep.
I wouldn't have a prayer selling to at that time. But there was a listing for a small press magazine called
Which one?
After Hours.
After hours.
Yeah, it was this little mag out of Southern California somewhere.
Right? Right?
Editor's name escapes me. It's long gone in the dust of time. Penny a word kind of thing. But through the writer's market, I sent him something, a story I had that, like I said, had been lying around for 4 years. And I think the guy phoned me and we talked on the phone. He was like, I'm interested in your story.
You
And I
really?
couldn't quite process that. I'm like, who the
Whoa.
hell is this guy I'm talking to? What is he trying to sell me? And I'm halfway through the conversation before I realize he's talking about my story. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is going on here?
Yep.
But eventually he said, I like your story. I like it more every time I read it. I remember that really well. And bam, the manila envelope comes back, not with the manuscript enclosed, but with just a single sheet of paper and a check clipped to the upper corner. And I was like, oh, wow,
That's great.
this
How
is
old
it.
were you at the time? How old were
That,
you?
that was a huge milestone. I mean, the difference
Wow.
between selling one story and two stories is not that big, but selling no stories and selling your first one is monumental. You know,
Wow.
when that happens to you, never forget it. Record everything. Stick that in your mind because you're going to relive that until you die.
Now, how old were you at the time?
I was 23. I moved out of the family house year or two before that. I was still using the family house as the address because the mailboxes in the apartment building that I'd moved to were just too small for, we're talking, they were the big manuscripts we used to send
Yep.
out, like papers, like
Yep.
Barbarians, or this is how it used to be. So I would go back to the house like once a week and I would get my mail, and there it was in the pile. And even when I picked it up and I felt how thin it was, I thought, oh my God, this could be it. This could actually be it. My life is never going to be the same if
Yep.
this is true. And that's exactly what it was. My life was never the same after that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was. I no fake.
Yep. Yep. It really amazes me to hear the stories of your youth because honestly, it's quite revelatory. It is.
Oh, it's just crap that happened to me.
Yep. Now, I'd like to talk to you about your father for a little bit
Oh, by
because he
all
was an
means.
amateur writer
Yeah.
and loved the word. And with him, before he died, you wrote a manuscript called "The Golden Gate is Empty."
Oh, yes, we did.
It was a really fantastic book, and it's going to be
Oh, thank
republished
you.
soon, in about next month. And tell me a little bit about the plot for that book.
Oh, by all means. Well, there's a great backstory to it.
Yep.
Like I said, my father was a amateur writer. I mean, he had real talent. He had a great ear for characters, for titles. He
Wow.
just didn't have like the time and the energy to put it all together. He was supporting a very large family, of which I'm the youngest member. So
Oh my gosh.
he really didn't have a chance. But that he got as far as he did is just remarkable. But if he'd had a different pathway in life, he could have been one of the name authors in the 1950s and 60s.
Wow.
That's no exaggeration. He could have been a very successful pulp writer, and I'm sure it would have been a much happier life. But anyway, he persisted, and that was one of the things I saw. It's like he would come up with ideas, and we would talk about things because we were both trying to make it happen. So we would share plot ideas and go back and forth. But he put together a short story in the 1980s. I was still in high school, and it was called "The Golden Gate is Empty Again." Yeah, the Golden Gate is empty again. So I had this short story and had the same basic idea of what eventually became the book, which is that the Golden Gate Bridge one day just vanishes. The whole span just pops out of existence. And
Wow.
it's this impossible event that reshapes the world. But even though it's an impossible event, it's happened and people have to adjust around it.
Right.
And the idea was the main character was a guy whose father had been on the bridge when it disappeared. So it was like this 9/11 event mixed with mysticism, where
Wow.
not only has this terrible thing happened, but it's this inexplicable thing that you can't square with physics or the real world or the stuff that you rely on every day. It's just boom, the bridge is gone.
Totally
All the people
magical,
who
right?
were on it. What's that?
Totally magical.
Yeah, exactly. And over the course of the story, I forget the particulars, but there were images in it that stuck with me and characterizations because he was great at putting together just in a couple of sentences very believable characters, kind of like what John D. McDonald was always able to do, where you've read half a paragraph. It's like, I know everything about this character who's just walking through the scene. How the hell did he do that? Vic had a little bit of that in him. And over the course of the story, it was only like
Elmore Leonard did it too, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Gosh.
God, yeah. Oh, man, was genius. Yes.
Yep.
Then over the course of the story, the guy who's the main character was written in the first person. His father's disappeared on the span. He's visiting the bridge site. And it eventually comes out that his father was the one who was responsible through magic powers of his own. I forget the details. He manufactured the disappearance of the bridge. And it was this beautiful, elegiac kind of emotional. It didn't quite come to the crescendo that it should have, but the idea was just beautiful. It was just a glorious, idea. And
it is a great idea. It's a great idea.
Well, he had really good ideas. He just could not quite puzzle box them into saleable manuscripts. But he was like that close. It was just amazing. But it was a great fertile thing for me to tap into because like I said, we would talk about stories and he took me seriously, which was freaking great. We would talk about plots and, oh, what if you did this? What if this idea? And he would suggest titles to me and stuff. And I've used bits and scraps of his stuff for years. Just, it's my way of keeping him alive.
I can understand that.
Yeah. So he's unable to sell this particular short story. I remember that he got a couple of good responses off of editors, but nobody who wanted to actually fork out money for the thing. But the idea stuck with me and I remembered it. And eventually the manuscript was lost. The original short story is gone. But
really?
Yeah. He might have burned it in the fireplace for all I know. Because,
so you remember
it's frustrating when you get nothing but rejection,
Yep.
So let me flash forward about 20 years or so. I'm living in New Orleans. I find out that my father's had a stroke. He's in his 70s. He's had a stroke. And I talked to him on the phone and he sounds like he's really had a stroke. And I'm like, oh, that's it for him. Not in any callous way. It was just like, oh, I think his time is done. And then I talked to him 4 or 5 days later. And he sounds like someone who has bitten his tongue. And that's as drastic as it is. And I'm like, how the hell did he do that? That's incredible. But I'd already arranged like, okay, I haven't been back home in years. I'm going to hop on the train. I'm going to go back to California because I don't fly. So go out to California and visit him. And he's just an amazing bounce back from what was really a big deal stroke. And he did the work. He did the therapy. He's like, give me the hardest stuff that you got. I'll do this, to a T. And he fought his way back. And it was just like, oh my God, this guy's like a plow horse. It's just amazing what he was able to do. I think it was just out of, just pure cussedness. It was very inspirational in a completely separate way from the writing. But I'm back there and I have no clear memory of why this occurred to me. But we were there and we just picked up where we left off and we would talk about writing, we talk about movies and books and it was great. And I could see him coming back and it's like, oh, he's not done. No, he's going to be all right. He's actually going to be freaking all right. He's able to walk. He's able to talk. He's still got his brain. He had his brain completely intact, which was just great. Yep. And I don't know where the germ of the idea came from me, but when I got back to New Orleans, I was like, I had such a, great time hanging out with him. And I was like, maybe we should collaborate on something. Hey, there's that story I remember from when I was a teenager that still haunts me about the Golden Gate Bridge. What if we expanded that into a story and do it in 2 separate viewpoints where now he's old enough, he can play the father who's gets lost on the span when it disappears. And I could write from the point of view of the son who comes back to San Francisco to see his mother and visit the bridge site. And he's still traumatized from this event. And there are things from the past that start being revealed. And I don't know why it occurred to me that we could do that, but I got on the phone with him and I proposed this to him and he was like, yeah, let's do that. And it was just that simple of a decision. It wasn't like, oh, this would be a great marketing opportunity and blah, 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 blah. Nothing. It was just the pure love of the thing. I said, let's do this. And then we started on it and I thought, okay, now here's the real tests. And he opened the book and he did the first chapter and I got it and it was like, oh, this is good. But, first chapters are first chapters. It's like, can you deliver,
Yep. Can
you keep going? So I wrote my first chapter and sent it off to him. And then it was, okay, now I'm going to wait. Now we're going to see, is he going to fall apart? Is it not going to happen? And like 2 or 3 days later, chapter 3 comes in and it's just as good as chapter 1. And I thought,
2 or 3 days later?
Yeah.
Wow, it's
Oh yeah.
fast.
Well, they were just like 10-page chapters. But then I thought, oh, it's on. Oh yes, here we go. If we can do this, we can get, we could do this straight through to the end. And it was just, oh, it was so much fun. It was such a great collaboration. We knew how it was going to end because it was going to end like it ended in the short story, which was a great crescendo to the thing. But if we could, seed in all the stuff before that, it would really pay off even better than it had in the original version of the thing. And I thought, all we got to do is get to there. I've got my timeline that I'm working in, which is the present, and he's got his timeline that he's working in, which is, I think, 7 years in the past, or it's basically the life of his son, and he's growing, and
Yep.
and the father is, he's working a job he doesn't like. He's dealing with alcoholism. So there's this melodrama that's going on with him, and there's magic in it, and he has certain abilities that, don't quite foreshadow what is going to happen unless you're looking at my chapters and going, oh, does this guy grow up to make the bridge vanish? And it all just came together on such a tight timeline. It was so much fun. It was an absolute blast. It was the best collaboration I've ever been involved in, the most fun. I wrote books with Robert Asprin, and this was a lot more fun, and Asprin was a freaking hoot. That guy was, he was made out of funny, but writing with my dad was just, it was just the payoff of a lifetime. It was just great because it was so on the money. It was right on the beat with everything. He would introduce a character in his timeline, and I would look at that and go, oh, I'm going to take that character, age them 20 years, and they're going to pop up in mine. And we would just trade this stuff back and forth. And I have no idea why it worked as well as it does, because we didn't outline the damn thing. We just went full tilt boogie into it. And it's like, okay, that's the hill we got to reach. I don't know what the terrain is like on the way there. We'll hop some trenches and claw through barbed wire, but it was like sprinting across a tightrope and not falling off. It was glorious.
That's a great story, Eric.
Oh, thank you. I never get tired of telling that one.
That was a really great story, right? Now, you've had a fulfilling career as a writer, but you're still on the edge to make it. And so tell me, what prompted you to write The Cold?
Oh, well, that's another one.
I'm really curious because it's a divergent.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's that's another one that started life as a short story.
Oh, really?
I can tell you the whole origin of this if you want to hear.
Sure, I'd love to hear.
Scoop the nuts there. It was back in the 1990s, and I was living in New Orleans the first time. Then I went back the second time and spent a lot more time
in the
there.
90s.
What's that?
In the 90s. That's a long time ago, man.
Long time ago, yeah. Kids don't even, oh my God, had the Earth cooled by then? I
know kids that are 2003 babies that couldn't relate to that.
Exactly, and they're welcome to it.
Wow.
Enjoy the planet. But I was around in the 90s. But okay, I'm down there in New Orleans and I'm reading the novel Children of Men by P.D. James. Long before the movie came out. Now, this is a book with a pretty simple premise. P.D. James is a mystery writer,
right?
But she wrote this science fiction novel. And it's simply about babies stop being born. And that's it. Humankind has gone sterile, and it's never explained, and it never really has to be explained. But it's not a mystical kind of thing. It's like this is probably environmental collapse. This is genetics gone wrong. This is all the horrible things we've been doing to ourselves over the decades since industrialization. So there's not going to be any more people, and that's it. And it's just humanity is quietly extincting itself. And as I'm reading this, and I didn't think the book worked that well. The movie's incredible. The movie's amazing. It's just the emotional impact of that film. That's on my top 5 science fiction films of
really.
All time. Oh yeah. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Original Planet of the Apes, Clockwork Orange, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Children of Men.
And the original The Thing.
Yes. Well, That was in the running, but I went with the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers because it had more metaphorical worth to it.
Yep.
So the original thing is just glorious. So I'm reading Children of Men, and the idea comes to me. It's like, oh well, people aren't going to be born anymore, and the idea just sprang to me. It's like, well, what if people just, instead of going extinct, what if they stopped being born with emotions? Now, there could be no scientific explanation for that. There's no way to dummy up a working hypothesis as to why that could possibly be. Oh, there's a brain parasite. It's like, no. That's useless. But the idea further occurred to me, what if I just make it a mystical event? I make it an inexplicable apocalypse, which is one of my favorite little subgenres. And I got two good examples of that. There's Stephen King's story Trucks, which eventually became the truly god-awful film Maximum Overdrive. But the story,
the original truly god-awful film.
Oh my God, it should be
horrible.
The
story was great, but the film was bad.
Oh yeah. It was just, it should be shown as punishment. But the original short story was just this beautiful, tight little thing, just takes place at a truck stop, and the trucks have come alive, and they're, running people over, and they eventually enslave these people at the truck stop to make them pump gas for them. But the only explanation is, like, the one guy's asking, why are they doing this? Why is this happening? And he just looks out at the trucks and he says, maybe they got mad. And that's the only explanation.
That's a great line. That's really a great line.
It's stuck with me. I read that short story and in Stephen King's Night Shift collection, just almost to memorization. But that's a really good example of the unexplained apocalypse, because it does not need to be explained. The story would not be enhanced in any way if you knew why this was happening. The fact that you don't know why it's happening just makes it all the more ominous. And I thought that's the way to go. So I wrote this up as I tried to write it up as a short story. It was called Come the Cold. And I took a couple of swipes at it. I lived in London for a brief time, and I wrote a version of it there that was just garbage. But the idea stayed with me, and I came back to the States. And at some point, probably the second time I was living in New Orleans, I wrote a version of it that was just right. It just landed perfectly. I wrote it first person, present tense. The language was really Baroque and artful. And I put it together, and it was 3,000, 3,500 words long. It wasn't, any great shakes. And there was no great plot to it. The idea was just, you've got this,
it wasn't terribly long, right?
What's that?
It wasn't terribly long, about 3,500 words.
Yeah. It was just, a very digestible size short story, something that you could, have an easier time landing in a magazine than you would like a 7,000 or 8,000 word or a novelette,
Yep.
But I took as the premise, okay, human beings have stopped being born with emotions, and it's happened all at once and without explanation. And this is 20 years on from that event. So what you've got left of the human race are people who are 20 and older, and they're olds. They are the olds. And there's people 20 and younger, and they're the colds. And none of them have emotions. And it was the idea of, well, what would that world be like? So I told it from the point of view of a 40-year-old guy who is intrigued by one of these 20-year-old colds, and he's attracted to this female, and he knows that she can never feel anything for him, but he's having his midlife crisis. But the world is also in absolute crisis, because people are going to be extinct in a way that is worse than everybody dying, where you're going to be replaced by human beings who look exactly like you, but have none of your feelings whatsoever. They're just creatures of logic and instinct, and all they're trying to do is just survive until you old people all die. Like the world we live in.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But he concocts this quasi-romantic relationship with this woman, and they get together, and it satisfies something in him and he can kind of face the world after that. It's just this bite-sized little thing. Mostly it was just getting the background and the feel of impending awfulness and doom. And I sold that story to another long defunct, I'm sure, magazine. It was called Sybil's Garage. And I've still got the copy on the shelf over there. And I thought, oh, that's a really good story. That's something that is right in my wheelhouse. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm trying to get at. Because, my father told me you write for an emotional effect. And it's like, oh, what if your emotional effect is that you're dealing with people who don't have any emotions and you're trying to, square that circle with yourself, spiritually. And it's like, this is the world I live in now.
Oh, that's a really clever idea, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. And it stayed with me. And I always had the notion that I would expand that one day, because I thought, there's plenty of material there. This does not need to be a plot-heavy book if I ever decide to tackle it that way. Basically, all I got to do is catch the atmosphere of the thing and show it from every possible side. What are the colds like? What do they think? How are they raised? What happened to the world when they showed up? Who's the last old who was ever born? And that's the last one that's ever going to be. What is it going to be like 20, 40 years from now when we're all dying off in the cold? What kind of civilization are they going to put in place of ours? All these little ideas. And I thought, it doesn't have to be heavy plot. It's basically just a day in the life. And instead of the guy just sleeping with the girl one time, it's going to be, okay, he's going to basically buy her for a month. Goes to her with an indecent proposal, says, I'll pay your rent for a month. You come live with me. We'll have sexual relations. What do you say? And he knows he's a creep. That's that, and he says it repeatedly. This is what a creep would do. This is an awful thing. But he's not a terrible person. He's not abusive. He's just trying to find out, is it possible to actually interact with these strange, emotionless creatures who are living among us and are going to take over our world? And then I sat down and I started doing the thing. It took me about 3.5 months. And I just tore through it. It ended up being my pandemic book, because I started it before the pandemic hit. And then I was finishing up as it was really starting to hit the fan. And it's like, oh, this is for real. This is one of the plague things from all the books I read when I was a kid. This is The Stand. This is Earth Abides. It's actually happening.
It is.
Yeah.
Now,
and it still is.
By the way, the artist really created a compelling cover for this, the Cold.
Yeah.
What is his name and his background?
That is Jay O'Connell. Jay O'Connell is a writer in his own right. He's been in Asimov's, Analog, fantasy and science fiction. He's got just a raft of short stories. He writes mostly near future science fiction. His stuff is really good.
He did a fantastic cover for you.
Yeah,
really
but
fantastic.
That's his other talent, is he would he does graphic design stuff. And
I'm surprised you find very few writers that have a graphic design background, and graphic designers that have a writing background.
Yeah, there's nothing I can do that's interesting except write. I do crossword puzzles. I write and then I'm nothing. But Jay O'Connell has this huge talent. But we were in an issue of one of the big magazines together, probably Asimov's, and I was reading the contributor's copy and I read his story and I was like, whoa, this is good. It's like that. Yeah. The age we live in, you can contact anybody you want. So either I reached out to him or he reached out to me. I can't remember which, but we hit it off. We were really compatible. I was like, oh, this guy gets me. He understands. He's basically going for the same kind of territory that I'm after, this sort of emotional engagement. You take a piece of technology and you don't explore, you need X amount of platinum in order to create this thing, and it was built at JPL and blah blah. Who gives a damn? No. What is the emotional impact on the society? He was able to do that with some really good ideas. I mean, really just sharp, clever social commentary stuff.
By the way, Eric, would you like to do another interview?
What's that?
Would you like to do another interview?
Oh, are we running out of time?
No, but honestly, about a half an hour is the limit for an interview.
Oh.
So but we'll do another interview next weekend, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
If you want. I mean, when I get going on this stuff, I will talk until the cows come home.
That's great. I mean, you're a great interview. I was loving it. By the way, both The Golden Gate is Empty is available on Amazon, any bookstore you want. And you really should read that book because it's really a fascinating read. It's a great book. It's a great book. And The Cold will be out in March.
Oh, that's going to be cool. Yes.
It will be great. And this will be available at any bookstore. But honestly, it's a really cool read. I'd love to interview you again, Eric, because you're a fantastic interviewer. All right.
Yeah. And it has a great cover, as I was getting to. I went to Jay and I said what I wanted, and we put this thing together, and it just, it like
really took me by surprise.
Oh, well, cool.
I was casting about for covers for it, and I reviewed a lot of artists, but when you got yours, I thought, this is fantastic. I've got to use it, man. This is really fantastic. And give kudos,
and I was able to communicate exactly, not, I need this image. I was like, this is the emotional impact I want the thing to have. And he concocted this glorious thing.
Wow.
When you see it, you will cry like everyone will.
Oh yeah. I showed it to some of the other officers in my stable, and they were amazed at it.
Cool. I will pass that on to Jay. He will like that.
So, all right. I'll see you next time. I'm Farrell D. Moore. This is Eric Del Carlo. He's a fantastic author and a great read, truly a great read. Right.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a blast, man.
Yeah. Until next weekend.
All right.
All right. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care.